funny as shit, Tom.
Exactly.
A lone rider? I mean, I ain't trying to ride on the fucking moon on my goddamn self. What do I look like? Elon fucking dumbass Musk? Hell no, ladies and gentlemen, I am the unknown factor, and this is the questionnaire. Yeah, and, I even know what episode number it is, but I'm still not saying what episode number it is, because it doesn't matter what episode number it is. Yeah, but, even if you bring the rock to rock, paper, scissors, Rick will still kick its ass. You just asked Sean Damian Hill, but that's not what it is tonight about, right? Tonight, yeah, we got artist Tom Kelly in the house. How you doing, man?
Doing all right. How you doing?
Man, I just know that, like, if y'all go check the Patreon, and if I'm able to get it up quickly, the conversation that we had before the show started was pretty funny and probably will piss off a lot of people. That's the main thing. Not that I haven't gotten into such topics, on the show, as far as cops using Punisher symbol and the likes of that. Which I'm glad to know you don't agree with, Tom. If I ever get a comic book creator on the show, it's like, oh yeah, man, I'm totally gun ho with him using the Punisher symbol. I might just be like, yeah, this interview's fucking over.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I mean, I don't think any creator, it's cool with someone just stealing their IP and using it and being like, well, it's ours now. It's because it speaks to us. I'm like, yeah, but like we created it. Like, I mean that's the weird thing, right? Like the internet, everyone gets to see cool stuff. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't understand that a lot of that stuff belongs to someone else, and you can either get permission to use it or pay a fee to use it, or ask the person nicely and maybe they'll just say, yeah, cool, hey, you're doing a charity thing, go for it. But a lot of times it's just like, that's cool and I'll use it, and it's a hassle. I mean, I've had to fill out a ton of forms and talk to people over the years to just be like, you stole that drawing I did, you stole my artwork, take it down, or pay me, or a bunch of different things, and it's just it's annoying.
I totally understand that. On that note, you can check out the most recent PanCon. Probably, I think it should be the most recent PanCon that's out that Tom actually appeared on. He's the only person that's ever come on a PanCon before he's come on his own quest. And I don't know. I told you, Tom, didn't I tell you?
Oh yeah.
Eh?
Oh, Omega Red, you gotta love them.
I told you I had that. I was like, dude, I got a shirt with a cover with his debut. Like, I literally, it's in my. I wore it. I figured it was appropriate, right? But you can see,
super cool.
yeah, you can see him draw a phenomenal Mega Red with a bit of a D&D twist, as well as 4 other artists do the exact same thing. But what we're talking about right now, man, as far as people stealing art, I just got to know them. I mean, there's a couple larger topics going on within the entertainment industry right now, and I say one of them is definitely AI art, right? The greatest example of AI art being used is the Secret Invasion intro.
Yeah, that's rough, man. I've watched that show and it's rough because it's not good. Like if you're going to use a tool to make intros for a pretty big budget television show, maybe you want it to look as good as you possibly can. And it kind of looks like some high school kids, like maybe a 7th grader, had a copy of Midjourney and sort of like crammed it all together in about an hour. Like it's not good. Like it just isn't.
Are you sure it's not like a 3rd grader? Because you say not good. And I think you're being very generous in saying not good, Tom. I have, and I'm sorry, Mike, because I know Mike won't even. Mike Roos, shout out to Mike Roos, man. He's a phenomenal artist. You can check him out on 2 PanCons coming up on another PanCon, as well as he's been on the show twice. As well as you can see this phenomenal Swamp Thing right here that he drew live on the show. That's art right there. That's a phenomenal piece. I'm so happy to have it as part of the background of the questionnaire. Um, he won't even watch the show based on that. Now, I've watched the show because I'm a huge Samuel L. Jackson fan. I can't lie, and I'm very curious to see how they're going to handle that story arc without bringing in any of the heroes. But God, dude, if it hadn't got interested by the 4th episode, which I'll be honest, it did. I think I would have stopped watching because that intro is the worst intro I can think of ever seeing in my life. Like, yeah, look,
Yeah, you know, I mean, I agree, and I think what's interesting though is that like they can always change that. Like, if they were gonna put like eventually these things will come out for like D&D or not, well, not D&D, but like DVD or like later on they'll have in their streaming catalogs that they that they'll license out to other like Netflix or whatever, so you can watch it on other platforms. And I do wonder because there are old TV shows from like the 80s that I remember watching growing up that have different intros because they couldn't get the rights to the music. There's one called Bosom Buddies with Tom Hanks, and that uses a Billy Joel song. I forget what the name of the song's called, but it's like the intro, it's all Billy Joel singing, and they had to change the song on the intro because of that. And then another one that was like super difficult to actually get into reruns and syndication on streaming was WKRP in Cincinnati, which is about a radio station, like a rock radio station in Cincinnati. But every episode, there are like Led Zeppelin songs. Like there are like real bands and real songs played for like about 60 seconds, 30 seconds, like clips all the way through. And it's just like, oh no, back when that TV show was made, probably the parent company owned most of the rights to be allowed to do that. And then over the years, in streaming, it's a brand new world and the rules are different, like, because they didn't set up the rules in the beginning. They're just like, oh, all that stuff. So I wouldn't be surprised if they changed the intro in like a year or like 6 months later. Like they'll just have an update and they won't tell anybody. They'll just change it, and you'll watch it one time when you're like really bored and you're like, oh, this was totally different. I mean, look at like Star Wars. Look at all the scenes they've added and changed in Star Wars. Just the first movie. I'm like, because I saw that as a kid. I saw that, like, my older brother took me to go see it in 78. And, I still remember, the way the TIE fighters didn't quite match the rest of the space background, or like some of the like janky things and scenes that were like, oh, that's a guy in a rubber mask. You can really, really tell, like, because I saw it on TV a million times. Like every Christmas, it'd just get rerun, and you'd see that version for forever. And now, literally, whenever I watch it, I know there's like one or two scenes that are different, and I know like what version that scene is in. Like it's like, oh yeah, well, like when you see the extra aliens in Anchorhead outside, where they like roll up with the land speeder, and there's like more aliens on the street. I'm like, oh, that's like the different, like that's one of the more recent adjusted versions. I'm like, so it can always change. Like, I guess that's really the thing. Like, if they want, they can go to and they can change that intro.
Why don't they? Dude, I would be happier if they did it like, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation type intro. Like, let's be fucking honest. Like, I mean, I just, like I said, I literally cannot
do it like they could do it like a James Bond intro where it's just Samuel L. Jackson walking around shooting people, or they can, there's so many ways and things they could do with really just the existing footage, like from the first episode, I mean, that, like, you look at the Bill Bixby Incredible Hulk, like, TV show, right? With, like, Lou Ferrigno. The entire opening credit sequence is from the first episode, which I think was, like, a TV movie.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's all you need. Like, that's all you got to do. It's not, you don't have to shoot extra stuff. You don't have to do much extra music recording or mixing. It's like, you've got it. You just get a decent narrator and be like, in a world. And, like, there you go. But
I look. I'll nominate myself to narrate. I'll put a good narration over, like, as long as you're not making me narrate over that bullshit AR. But I have digressed extremely from the point as far as your opinion of AIR, because obviously I don't want to know what that particular intro all stole from. It obviously stole from a lot because it's fucking Midjourney, and that's what Midjourney does, right? Let's be real honest. And you were speaking earlier as far as people just, jacking your art. Look, if you want to, there's a real dope Omega Red right here. Don't be a dick and jack it that Tom actually drew on the show. You can go and watch Tom draw it, but don't be a dick and steal it. All right.
Yeah. You can watch me draw it. You can hit me up and say, I mean, it's an analog piece. If you want it, you can just hit me up and buy it from me. It's, I mean, cool. I mean, because that's usually what happens with sketches like this stuff. It goes into my portfolio, and then when I'm at shows, I have my originals with me.
Look,
and
Tom,
over the years, people have bought stuff.
I'll give you $5 and it'll go in the background.
Oh, I can sell for more than 5, man. I know that.
I know that, Tom. No shit. But come on, man. I was just trying to show you some love in the background.
Hustle a hustler. You can't hustle a hustler. Come on.
I would look, but I was gonna put it in the background of the show too, man.
I see. Great exposure. I understand.
See, I'm look, man. I'm doing it how they do fucking rappers. Look, why don't you pay $200 to come open for this dude who's a bigger name than you? And it's great exposure, man. Just pay to come fucking perform.
Right.
You have no idea how many times I've heard that bullshit, Tom. Are you fucking kidding me?
I mean, you get that a lot as a visual artist in comics, as a comic artist. You get a lot of that. Or you get people with really low ball numbers, and you're like, you just sit there and say hey, how about this much? And they're like, well, I can't afford that. I'm like, well, okay, it's money and I'm asking you to pay me. I get that. But, exposure, here's the thing. If you make anything, you still got to be able to sell it and promote it and hustle it. And if I was to do something free for someone's book, because I've done work for charity projects, and those projects actually have been promoted, and people come up to me at shows, and I still sign in the books and things, because I do stuff for Hero Initiative and other charity things, right? And that's super cool. I have no problem with that. But it's more of if I do work on a project and you're great exposure, but then you suck at actually promoting it or selling it or whatever, then it's no, then it isn't good exposure. Then I just work for you for free. And not for nothing, when people always still act like your boss, even if you're not getting paid well or getting paid at all, there's still a certain amount of micromanagement, because usually the person, like me, I'm an illustrator, I'm a penciler, I can ink, I can color, I can do all that stuff. So oftentimes if I get hired for a project, it's for indie projects, it's the writer. The writer is the person who's also paying me. So they're sort of the publisher and the writer, and then there's me. Well, it's kind of in any creative argument, I'm outnumbered 2-1. Because if I say hey, you've written this scene in the script, that's cool, but how about we do this, and that'll change things a little bit differently, but it'll set up the next page better, and or just it's one of those things where I'm the visual side of the equation, and I'm not trying to tell the writer oh, you're wrong. I'm saying not everybody can my job specifically is to take the words and turn them into pictures. A writer's job is to take what's in his head and turn it into words. So it's just one of those scenarios where like you can be outnumbered because if the person is, I mean, look, like in music, right? When you go to a venue, let's say it's a bar down the street or whatever, you talk to the person who books the bands. That's their job, and they work for the bar or the venue. But if that person who books the bands is also the owner of the bar, and they don't like you, or they're like trying to lowball you or trying to tell you like whatever, like you're outnumbered. Like that's like, okay, well, this is the guy who books the venue, but he's also the owner of the venue. So if he doesn't like us, or he's not willing to pay us the right amount, or give you like a smart deal that's actually doable, you're kind of like, well, I can't negotiate with that because we're never on equal footing, right? So that's sort of how that beast can come along.
I can relate way more to that than I would bloody well like to be real honest. And as far as the promo, I know I suck at promo, Tom. Leave me the fuck alone.
No, it's hard. It's super hard because creative people want to create. We don't want to have to go out and sell. Like that's another gear that's hard to do.
It's not necessarily that in my case. Personally, it's the fact that this is a one-man show.
Yeah.
You know?
It's a lot of work.
Yeah, and I also have a normal ass job. Yeah. We gotta have that, and I've got a kid, and so it's more of a time thing. And I am definitely trying to work on my time management skills, but at the same time, I got way deep before I finally set up the Patreon properly to where I'm posting the questionnaires and I'm doing things I should have done.
If someone starts off as a garage band and then they play out and maybe send a demo tape or some demos into a label and then they get signed, the label is supposed to handle some of the promo and some of the booking. Now, they don't, because usually you still have to do it because they're doing a dick job. Then you get up to maybe a bigger label who's going to be better at doing that, and then a bigger label that does that. It's a beast. And in comics, it's the same way. Like, you're out there hustling yourself, and then, for example, like, real talk. I have a bunch of artist friends here in Chicago. All of us have done different like image books over the years, and like I know like with Ryan Brown, like he's got a great book, his own creator-owned book called God Hates Astronauts. It's super funny. It's drawn awesomely, but there are times when he's just like, man, I got to work like twice as hard than the promo. Yeah, like than the promo people, because he's like, yeah, they're just not. Because here's what happens is like, you're one artist, let's say, in a stable of a bunch of artists. And if one or two are bigger than you or maybe just hotter at the moment than you're not getting the love from the publisher, right? Like, yeah, they still want to sell books, but they're not pushing your book as hard as maybe they could. So then it falls on you to like, I mean, look, Ryan for like, what was it? A Wizard, that Wizard book. Like he went on a van tour with Charles Soule, like all over the Midwest. And like, dude, like Ryan's married. He's got a kid at home. He's in a van with Charles Soule, still drawing the comics on a year-long tour or whatever it was, or maybe like a 6-month like driving tour to different comic shops to like stop and do that. I'm like, dude, that's a berserko hustle that like, to try to push to propel that book, to really get the sales, right? Because you need to get orders and sales, and you just have to, really essentially be like this ultimate crazy hype man of like, yeah, I'm gonna show up and jump out of the van, I'm gonna be the wizard, and I'm like blah 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 blah, like it's a super hustle. It is,
You know
man.
what I think would make it way easier for all creatives personally? Um, and I truly mean this sincerely, is if minimum wage had followed the percentage of raising with the cost of living, because when the cost
Yeah.
of living skyrockets and wages aren't going up, suddenly you can't get what you want as far as to, relax your mind. You know what I mean? Because you don't have the money because you got to get fucking milk, which look for
Yeah.
anybody that
I mean,
wants to do the math out there.
yeah.
Yeah, it's stupid. The
Well,
cost of
it's
milk
like a
is
time management battle, like you said earlier, of like, okay, so let's take me for example. Let's say it takes me let's say I can do a page of pencils in a day. So what is a day? Let's say that's from 9 to 9 o'clock at night. Let's say that's an average day of drawing pencils. I'm gonna take some bathroom breaks and maybe like a 30-minute break for lunch, right?
you gotta eat.
So, right? And that's still a full day. That's a full day of work. But if I'm not getting paid, a certain like minimum wage for my time, and you don't get paid by the hour, you get a page rate. Like for every page you do,
Yeah.
it's a certain amount of money, which is fine. But again, it's one of those things. It hasn't adjusted for inflation over the years, so it's your rate. You have to adjust your rate and just say like, this is what it costs to hire me per page for a project. And if they say no, or they can't afford it, or that's not in our budget, you just have to go, all right, fine. Like I'm moving on. Like I can't. It's one of those things. Like you said, like it'd be nicer and better if minimum wage adjusted with inflation, so that it was easier for people to pay other people to do stuff. I mean, indie comics is a lot of that sort of universe of like, oh, how much does you cost to do your artwork or to do a cover or whatever? And you say, okay, X amount. And they're like, always like, whoa, that's not in my budget. I'm like, okay, I get it. Now, granted, it's 2023 and a lot of indie books kickstart and crowdfund their books. So you don't have to have the whole book done before you go to say Kickstarter. You can hire your artist and say, draw 4 pages, like 4 pages in a cover. Pay that out of your pocket because that's promotional, and then go out and say, all right, we're gonna make a 24-page book, a 32-page book, a 200-page book, whatever, and this is the money we need to do that. That's it. I mean, that's all these funds are, whether it's Indiegogo or Kickstarter. And if you can hustle and get your hype up and really shake every tree, you'll get funded, and then the creative team gets paid a decent amount of money, and you get to make your book, and then you get to sell your book. Like that's another factor of the thing of that, like it's kind of like hot dogs and hot dog buns. If you buy in bulk, everything is cheaper. So if you need to let's say 500 comic books, like 500 copies of a comic, regular, like whatever, say 500 of this, right? Let's say that costs like $1,000. I don't know, just round numbers. So if 500 cost 1,000, maybe 1,000 only costs like 1,300, and maybe 2,000 only costs like 1,500. So you start seeing like that, like, oh, like the more I get, the costs aren't that much higher, and that makes the per unit cost that I have to sell and make money at much lower. Like your profit margin's lower. Right?
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, if I have 3,000 books and it costs me $3,000 to make them, then I have to sell every book at $2 to make $1 profit. So if I can sell a book for $3, I'm making $2 profit off every book, and that's like 200% profit.
Where the hell you seen a $3 comic book in the past 5 years?
Oh, never. Well, never, right?
Okay,
like that's the whole
okay.
thing.
I just
But though that DC book I just put up to you, I guarantee you it doesn't cost more than $1 to produce because of the volume that they printed at. And Marvel and DC constantly print every week. Every week. So the printers they use, they have long-term deals with. So they get a huge price break that independent people don't get. Like if you contact a printer and say, hey, I need to get X number of books made, they give you a rate. They give you just a straight rate. They don't give you price cuts. But if you're like a regular customer at anywhere, you know, even if it's the local bar down the street, like that, you know, the bartender's going to slide you a couple drinks or like give you 1 or 2 on the house. Cause like, hey man, you're always here. Like you tip well, good job. And, you know, Marvel and DC, like that's what I'm saying. Like if I would be shocked if it cost them $1 a book. I'd really be shocked. Any book, no matter the worst selling book they produce, definitely costs them less. And they produce, you know, huge amounts of it. Like they get them printed in decent amounts.
Oh yeah, I mean, but then you hear like there's a certain degree of those books that are never bought and they essentially just sit at Marvel. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I mean, you do have to also account for
back
that.
in the day when it was like a newsstand, right? The way that deal was, the distributor didn't pay for the books. The books were shipped to them, and then they put the books out to sell. Whatever sold, they reported to the publisher and said, okay, you sold X number of Spider-Man this week. You gave us, you know, double that. Like, you know, you gave us 30 Spider-Man and we sold 15. So those other 15, well, we're not spending money to ship your books that didn't sell back to you. We're ripping off the covers, sending those back as sort of proof that they didn't sell. And then we're just tossing the books that didn't sell into, you know, the trash, essentially. I mean, that's what pulping a book was. Like that's the process. And that's why if you look in back issue, well, you used to be able to see, you can't see it much now, but back in the day, some newsstands wouldn't do that. They'd be a little shady and they'd rip off the cover, but they'd still sell you the book just at like a reduced price because it was all profit for them. So,
yeah. I mean, there were shady tactics in business. Imagine that. You know, that's about.
Well, yeah, it's just one of those things where. But I mean but the business model shifted because the newsstands, which were everywhere at, you know, during like the 40s, right? They were everywhere. Every corner had a newsstand. Somewhere around the early 80s or the late 70s, comic book shops started to show up. The deal with them though was, and they didn't realize this because they were different vendors. They were different retailers who didn't know this. Marvel and DC sold the books to them. They said, oh yeah, well, when you order books from us, you're buying that book. And if you don't sell it, well, too bad, you know? And so comic shops were like, okay, that's the way the world is. That's the way the world is. And the 80s was a weird boom time for comics because collectors were kind of, you know, a bit jacked. So they over-ordered a lot of stuff. And in the beginning, it sold well. But then it started to go down and they got stuck with a lot of stuff. And the ones that managed to get through that time are much more savvy, are much more like, they'd rather underbuy a book and have it like reordered than like go all in and be like, oh, nobody wanted that book. Like nobody ever wanted that book to buy, you know? Well, I mean, like, cause like I talked to, I've gone to a comic shop since I was a little kid growing up in Pennsylvania. I live here in Chicago. I know a bunch of the guys who own the different shops in Chicago. Like Chicago's a big city, and there's a bunch of comic shops. There's at least like 10 in and around like the metro area. And I know most of the guys who own and run and operate them. And so like we always talk about like stuff like the Fortnite comic. So DC did a deal with Fortnite. This was like several months back. And the deal was there was a code inside the comic that you could get like a specific Batman skin for Fortnite. Like your Fortnite character, if you bought the comic, you got this code. It was a one-time code, and you could get one or two rare skins that might be like the all-white Batman or a certain Harley Quinn or like whatever. The thing is, DC never told the retailers that was going to have that was a thing. Like they didn't know there was a code inside. They just didn't know to say like, hey, expect interest and orders to be higher for this because Fortnite's a very popular game and this is a very collector skin and things like that. So I remember being in the shop and they were talking about that book at Challengers, and they were like, we just keep getting phone calls from like kids are like, do we have the Fortnite comic? And they were like, who buys Batman Fortnite? Like why is this, why is this a thing, right? And, it's like if you have no heads up and you really don't kind of know, you're like, because like in the comic book world, there's comic book events that comic book fans will be into. Like if you're an X-Men fan and they're doing a specific event with like creator, like, I mean, for example, like anytime Rob Liefeld comes on a Deadpool book, that's a big deal, whether he's writing it or doing artwork for it. So, fans keep, comic book fans, they sort of know that their ears are to the ground. And then there's like a certain amount of interest you can anticipate and predict. But when it's something from like a third sort of outside of the comic book sphere, it's like, I don't know, like we'll get it. Sure, it's a Batman. But
like this or this?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I'm sure lots of people like listening are like, oh yeah. But it's like like for example, let's say Taylor Swift, right? Like she's a big touring juggernaut right now. If she was to do something in comics, like let's just say they want to do cross promotion for like for whatever, and so they're going to do like an appearance of Taylor Swift in like Batman and Robin go to a Taylor Swift concert, or the X-Men all go out to like the New Mutants go to a Taylor Swift concert.
No. I'll give you a better one. I'll give you a better one. She's the special performer at the Hellfire Gather.
Right,
yeah. That would be one if they were going to use it. I think would be best in my opinion.
Right, and then you said like, okay, she's a special performing guest of the Hellfire Gala, and we have a special single that's only downloaded in that comic. Holy crap, right? Like that would sell. That necessarily might not sell the comic book fans because they're like, oh, it's a Hellfire annual, like, okay, whatever, like it's not in the main storyline, whatever. But to Taylor Swift fans, that's huge, right? So
yeah,
that's one of those things, right? Like it's well, I mean, you look at like what is it, the Muhammad Ali versus Superman comic back in the day, where they're like that was a big like crossover thing, and yeah. So
I mean, the only examples I can think of where, I mean, because I know when they initially like when Chaos did both the WWE characters that had a lot of people reading comics that never did, as well as when they they did the Insane Clown Posse run, and then Image did the Kiss Psycho Circus with McFarlane, and then so I mean, there's definitely been examples of that. I was like, yeah. So
also ones that sort of like popped and fizzled. Like, do you remember when Tyrese Gibson did his comic Mayhem?
No.
Right. Okay, so everybody out there, Google Tyrese Gibson, you know, the guy from the Fast and the Furious movies, and Mayhem, just regular Mayhem. That was a comic book character, a comic book he either like co-wrote or whatever. It was his own IP. Basically, it was something he wanted to pitch as like an action movie, like for him. And I distinctly remember it, and this was years ago, because I remember him at like San Diego Comic-Con, like behind some booth, you know, pushing, some book, and you just see this big thing like Mayhem, and you're like, and of course, the character is drawn to look like Tyrese Gibson,
Sure.
and you're like, oh, okay, Again, so like celebrities and folk have, there's always a certain amount of cross-pollination, because they're licensed properties like Star Trek, Star Wars, those are constant comics, right? And I mean, again, like, okay, so let's take Star Wars as an example. So years and years ago.
One moment, real quick, man. I'm sorry, my dog's going nuts. Liz! Oh, it's fine, puppy. All right. Sorry about that one moment, ladies and gentlemen. Sometimes my dog goes crazy, and I'll tell you the main reason I think it was because you brought up Star Trek, you know what I mean? We just had Heather Antos on the show, and they're actually, for the first time, doing a fairly big event in Star Trek that's going to cover more than one Star Trek comic. Like, it's going to be, I think it was 2 or 3 comics over 2 different arcs. And they've never done that before in Star Trek, so that's something else that they're doing. It's a big event. Apparently, my dog got excited.
Yeah, well, I mean, who wouldn't be? Who wouldn't be excited?
And Heather Antos is great, to be real honest, too, as far as, like, she's a pleasure, man. You should check out her work. She's got me ordering Star Trek comics, and I ain't even a Trekkie.
Yeah, no, one of a good buddy of mine, a comic book artist friend of mine, J.K. Woodward, he does a lot of the Star Trek comics. And he's done a bunch of that stuff. So he's been on like the Star Trek cruises and like other like Star Trek like fan things. Like he's met like a whole bunch of the actors from every like version,
Ooh.
like every era. Like I think he met Joan Collins. Like it's pretty funny. Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Oh yeah, go ahead though.
Like when you take like, okay, or like for example like Star Wars.
Excuse me. Oh.
I don't know if you guys. I mean, I don't know if you know. Maybe some of the other folks watching this, but so in the Star Wars comics, there was this character called Quinlan Voss.
My brother would probably know that, and I mean my
he was created for the comic. Like that's where he's created. He's not an in-canon character in any of the movies. He was created in the comic and is sort of in canon, like in the universe officially. I only bring him up because I actually met the like model actor who posed for that character. Like it's his likeness. And I met him at like a charity event, and it's just very unusual because it's like a character was created in another media, and then that gets ported into the official canon of the universe. It's sort of like how Harley Quinn was created for the DC animated Batman show, and then was brought into like comics and then like video games and movies and all that stuff, and is officially in the canon. Usually it doesn't go that way. Usually to create any type of character in an existing intellectual property universe, there's a lot of like steps you have to go through, and like it's just a lot of layers because they know they won't fully own it and stuff. Yeah.
All the good red tape, man. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of red tape, and it's just don't worry, be happy, don't kill me. Tom's over here like, dude, look, you said you rap. Don't start singing. I swear to God, I'll leave the interview. But I think I mean, that's something that really hasn't happened that often, though, as far as like in the case of Harley Quinn, man. There are very few instances. The main other one I can think of would be Morph, who was created for the X-Men animated series, and then he became, like,
Yeah.
in my opinion, he's one of the best parts of the Age of Apocalypse as well as the Exiles. You know what I mean? But I mean, that doesn't happen a lot,
Like
especially.
Starfire from Spider-Man: The Amazing Friends. Do you remember her?
Yeah, yeah.
So I think she's on the current X-Men team or whatever now, but like she's in the Marvel universe like officially.
Yeah.
But that was another, like, she was created for that Spider-Man animated show, back in like the 80s, just because they needed another character. They wanted a girl character on the show, and they just decided Iceman, Spider-Man, and a fire person, and so they created Firestar.
But
it's super rare. Yeah, it's super rare because you don't own that character completely. There's a lot more like stuff you have to pay.
Let's get into something else that I find to be a rarity, in my opinion, which is when someone takes a character who no longer has a copyright or trademark under it, and an older character that's from a classic standpoint, and does something very, very intriguing. Like Chuck, who you can check out his past quest, took Sherlock Holmes and threw Alice in Wonderland's world onto Baker Street.
Yeah.
It's very, very intriguing. Right? I haven't gotten a chance to read it, Tom, but Fist Foot Frankenstein. How you gonna make? And I've looked at quite a bit of it. Some of the stuff you've released. How you gonna make Frankenstein a badass like that, man? That's just kind of frightening.
Well, with the book, my premise was, what if the Incredible Hulk could fight like Bruce Lee or like Jet Li or Jackie Chan, right? Like, because the Hulk doesn't fight. Like, he pushes and he's super strong, but he doesn't really like Daredevil, Batman. They fight. They have moves. They know how to like strike and flip and kick and all that stuff. And I thought, like, well, what if a martial artist was that strong, was as strong as the Hulk? And then just sort of took that concept, and then, well, I know I don't own the Hulk, but who is a Hulk-like character, and like, the Frankenstein monster is pretty much one of the templates for the Incredible Hulk. So it's like, okay, I can sort of make use of that. And it's also nice because at least Frankenstein has a certain amount of like name recognition. Like, a lot of people have never read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and have only seen, one or two movies, but like they've all seen like the Munsters and dressed up in Halloween and like seen a bunch of stuff. So it's like, okay, like they know the name Frankenstein. So it can at least get people's attention that might be not, because I could have called it, Kung Fu Monster or like Shaolin Beast or like a bunch of stuff like that. And it's just, it helps if you have something else to help people to latch onto, because when I'm at shows and I try to tell people like, here's the book, I have to be able to like really have a very quick pitch that will, that they'll sort of understand, and then like we'll kind of hook them at least to be curious to like open it up and check it out. And so at least with Frankenstein, they're like, well, I know what that is. And then I'm like, well, do you like martial arts movies? Yeah. Like, well, imagine if Frankenstein could fight like a badass martial artist. And they're like, oh, that sounds cool. And then, then you open up the book and you see like, it's a full story and an adventure. And I get to draw, ninja fights and samurai swords and cool weapons and awesome kicks. I mean, all the stuff that I love from watching like all the Kung Fu theater as a kid and all the 80s ninja movies and like tons of video games. I get to take all that stuff and put it into the book and be like, oh yeah, check it out. It's super cool,
I mean, and it is a very intriguing combination, man. Why Was it just you pretty much were like, I want something that's super strong like the Hulk, and just Frankenstein kind of came to mind? Or was that a process before you finally gave, and it's Frankenstein's monster if I'm going to be a dick about it, but
Well, actually, see, here's the thing. I solved that equation in my book.
Oh yeah.
Because for anybody, okay, so if you guys, you can always hit me up online or go to my Etsy store and you can get a copy of Fist Frankenstein. But the real skinny in it is this. So in the entire book, the book's like 200 pages. He's only ever called a monster. At the very end, the last line is, I am Frankenstein. He names himself at the very end of the book because in his, like, all during the book, he's considered this evil monster and he doesn't see himself as that. He's like, well, look, I'm on a righteous quest for vengeance. That's really what he's on in the book. And at the very end, he sort of comes to this realization, like, people are only ever going to see me as a monster, so I might as well embrace that. And so that's where he names himself. And in his mind, the worst monster is his father, Dr. Frankenstein, who treated him like shit. So he's like I said, so it's like, okay, I'll be the monster. If they want a monster, they'll get a monster. And it's like, I am Frankenstein. And that's the last line in the book. And so, because I did know that, like, everyone was going to give you that nerd, but like, I'm actually, it's the Frankenstein's monster, or the creature. It's not that. I'm like, you're right. You are correct. But nobody ever says that. You know, nobody ever says, hey, look, there's a Frankenstein's monster. They're like, oh, hey, look, it's Frankenstein. Like, it's like, you know. Also, from a weird standpoint, Dr. Frankenstein, that's his last name, right? It's Dr. Victor Frankenstein. When he makes the monster is his surrogate son. So technically, you could also say that, like, that is Frankenstein because he's part of the family. All right. That's a reach. That's a nerd reach, I know, but it's there.
I'm pretty positive that that's been used somewhere else, as far as like it was his son, and that's why they called him Frankenstein as well.
There's so many B movies and so many Frankenstein movies that
And there's a ton of literature. There's a ton of stuff that includes Frankenstein's monster. That
stuff's public domain. So you can take it and use it as long as you sort of follow the criteria of the public domain rules, right? You have to use the character from Mary Shelley's book Frankenstein and the characters within that universe. You can take them and evolve them out of it, but you have to sort of start with that point. The same when people use Sherlock Holmes, there's certain traits of the public domain Sherlock Holmes that anyone can use, but then there are other stuff that are like come later in the movies that like Paramount owns, or like, for example, like Dr. Frankenstein and the Frankenstein monster are in the public domain. The Bride of Frankenstein is not.
Huh.
She was created for a movie. She wasn't created in the original source material that Mary Shelley created. And so when things go into the public domain, it's that original source material that goes into the public domain. Just like Winnie the Pooh is in the public domain now. But the red shirt version of Winnie the Pooh that everyone sort of recognizes, that's owned by Disney, and that is still copyrighted. Yeah. Or like Snow White. Like Snow White was a fairy tale. You can't do the Disney Snow White. You can't make it look like that, but you can do a version of Snow White.
God, I thought you were going to bring up that Pooh film.
Oh, no.
Have you seen it?
Oh, yeah. I know what it is. I've seen parts of it. I'm like, it's its own beast. But again, like, because that character is in public domain, they could make that.
That's
They
fine.
just can't make it look like the Disney property. You know?
That's fine. Just give me a Five Nights at Freddy movie, not that fucking bullshit, is all I'm saying. Though I'm glad they're making a Five Nights at Freddy movie, but that's neither here nor there. But, man, you went so crazy with that, I kind of forgot what my initial, because,
Well, you were asking me,
first,
did I just kind of take the
yeah,
premise of like,
firstly though, sincerely, as far as for how you used that and made it to where it was him naming himself as the greatest monster he knew, dude. That is a phenomenal twist as far as to take that there, Tom. It really it's well thought out in my opinion. But is there was no other creatures that came across your mind where I could maybe use this? Like I mean you could have used a
well,
Sasquatch or a bottle snowman, anything like that. There was nothing else that you kind of lingered on before you landed on Frankenstein?
no, I mean, I did think about a bunch of stuff. I did think about other classic like horror monsters, and I did think of other just sort of more generic monsters. But for what I wanted to do in the story, you know, I I didn't want to do something super magical and super occult because that's very Hellboy. Like that's very close to like what Hellboy does.
Fair enough.
And I mean, like I love Mike Mignola, I love Hellboy, I love those books; those are great. But I felt that like instead of trying to do just my version of Hellboy, try to do something a little different. So I did purposely take certain things off the table and say, well, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing magic. He's not going to fight demons. He's not going to, fight a dragon. He's not going to do this, that, or the other. So yeah, it could have been like Sasquatch or Bigfoot. It could have been some sort of Greek myth. Like it could have been a Minotaur. Like, you know what I mean? Like it could have. But I did like the real germ of the idea was what if the Hulk knew kung fu? And then I was like, well, what is the closest kind of analog to the Hulk? And then I was like, all right, well, Frankenstein. So it was like, but I did like think about and explore that. Like I thought like, well, maybe the character should be female. Like that could be interesting. But then I was like, well, the Bride of Frankenstein, gone, and you can't use that, and
Real quickly, I just gotta say, if the Hulk knew kung fu, World War Hulk would have went way, way, way different.
Well, yeah. I mean, well, no, but it's like, for the people out there, I'm sure there's people who've read Hulk comic books, and if you've read a lot of Hulk comic books, every once in a while, the Hulk he's the big green Hulk, but he's like coherent. He's like smart enough, and whether he's on War World or whether he's shrunk down into the micro universe, and he's like a gladiator or whatever. Like, I mean, like, World War Hulk is like, it's like Spartacus. Like that's the story. Like he's a gladiator, he's fighting it out, and that's why it's like you don't have to overthink some of these things. You're like, what is a cool story? Oh, the story of Spartacus. Could I turn the Hulk into Spartacus? I suppose. Well, how would we do that? Maybe if he's on an alien world, okay, let's have fun with that. So, and the same is like, yeah, like if he knew kung fu, you're like, yeah, he'd totally be a badass, of course, because you have all this power and strength, and then you have training behind it, right? Because like you look at the way like Daredevil can fight. Daredevil can take on like 3,000 ninjas in a fight, and win, right? And Batman's the same way. Batman can fight his way through the League of Assassins, and and that's super cool because like, hey, they're supposed to be cool ass fighters, but they're not like super strong or super tough. And it's like, well, what if they were? Geez, like they just march through them like a knife through hot butter, So
It just makes me, and it just brings to my head because I'm World War Hulk is probably my favorite Hulk storyline
it's super
personally.
fun,
Yeah, it's just a phenomenal storyline. It was interesting to see them take that character and be like, you know what? Fuck you guys, and like be looking at all the Marvel heroes, and it just makes me think they essentially had to send the Sentry after him to stop him. Well, if he would have known martial arts and suddenly he was using the Sentry's power against him, yeah, he would have killed everyone. That's all I'm saying, man. Like if you, if
I mean,
yeah,
yeah, I mean, it's always the fun stuff of, you know, having to have a weakness into these characters. You know, the Hulk's weakness is usually he's not very smart, or he's very much just a rage monster. So you can sort of run him off a cliff or lock him in a spaceship and shoot him into the moon or whatever, and like things like that.
so
Um,
without getting too
you know,
spoiler, then Tom, I gotta know, how do you make somebody that power level and give them that fighting skill? Like, what weakness do you present at that point? They're really naive.
well, it depends, right? Like, so let's take a character like Wolverine, right? Wolverine has a metal lace skeleton, which is like super strong. He's got claws, which are super cool, and then he has a healing factor. It's really Wolverine's healing factor that's like the most powerful thing,
Oh yeah.
because you can cut him, you can burn him, you can shoot him, you can poison him, you can do all these things, and that won't kill him, right? Then the metal skeleton is something like, well, you can't just cut off his head, right? Because it's too hard to do that. Like it's all joined up, so it just wouldn't happen. So that character is sort of almost indestructible, but still feels pain, can still feel fear, can still be like put out of action if he's poisoned enough or drunk enough or whatever. So there are these like limits that are put in there. You know, with me and the Frankenstein monster, it's a lot like that in that like he's super strong and super tough, but he still bleeds. He still can get cut. He still has to fight. He still can get burned to death. He can still, you know, like I mean, like if you throw Wolverine into a volcano, you know, an active volcano, he's probably gonna die because he'll just burn so fast before he can get out of the lava to regenerate. Or if you throw him into the sun. And so it's like you can find ways to limit your characters. You just don't have to turn them up to 11 all the time.
See, but
Like
it's
my
like,
character
okay,
is
okay.
at like 7, you know, not 11, 7, you know.
It's funny that you say that though specifically about Wolverine because they've shown him in the film specifically walking towards Jean Grey when she was just disintegrating everybody and he's healing from it. But at the same
Yeah.
time, in Punisher Kills the Marvel Universe, all he did was shove him onto a transformer and it fried his brain and he died. You know, so it is
Right.
very much a like, okay, well he couldn't take that, but he could take that. That's very odd. But to that note, man, I'm curious, like, are you planning a sequel to this, Tom? You planning to do something else? Are you planning on
Yeah.
are you planning on bringing in a fist foot Dracula or a fist foot mummy or a fist foot
Well, you know, see,
creature from the
that's the
Black
funny thing,
Lagoon?
right? Like,
Look, no. Look, that's the one I want, Tom. That's the one I want. Fist foot creature from the Black Lagoon.
well, I am working on like volume 2 right now, and that is it is a follow-up, but it's more like sort of on the road journey, because there's a larger arc going on in the first book that will be resolved by like the third book essentially,
Okay.
and this is like an in-between time. But the thing with the rules I set up for the book was, like I said, I didn't want magic, right? And I didn't want demons. So if there's a vampire, it's not a vampire like Peter Cushing has to fight. It's a psychopath who drinks blood because they think they need to drink blood to survive. Right? If it's a werewolf, it's a serial killer who thinks they are a wolf when they put on a wolf skin and go off and, attack people. So if there was like a creature from the Black Lagoon, it might be a giant alligator, or it might be a giant anaconda, or a mutant sea creature, right? It wouldn't necessarily be a Gillman, because that's a little too into the like magic-y demon world that I want to go directly to. Like, again, like Hellboy would fight the creature from the Black Lagoon. I don't want to get in there. Not that anything's off the table, but it's not the first tool I'm going to grab out of the toolbox.
Fair enough.
Like maybe, for like a creature of the Black Lagoon thing, it might be something like a fisherman who's, been either, mutated by, contaminated fish or something, or some sort of weird, it might actually be somebody trying to even replicate what the Frankenstein monster is. Somebody who took like people and fish bits and sewed them all together to try to make some sort of amphibious thing, and it's just a horrible monster, right? Right.
That's intriguing.
Yeah.
If you do that, I want partial credit. I'm just kidding, Tom.
I'll give everybody partial credit, But again, it's like I have to find a way to make my universal sort of ground rules fit with these other things, which are all cool. Like an alien could come from outer space and could fight with my character. It just wouldn't be so like on the nose sci-fi. It would have to be almost something like, well, we found this thing and we don't know what it is, and maybe it's from space, or maybe it's a weird mutant, or maybe it's just a crazy person who thinks they're from space. Like things like that. Because it's just like, yeah.
Very, very intrigued, Tom. And for all y'all out there that if you are intrigued as well, I want to let you know, click the links in the description. You can go, you can pick up Fist Foot Frankenstein. You can go, support the Kickstarter for the second one if it's running by now. It's probably not. I don't think you're going to get that done before I get this edited. Unless I have like a 5-month.
I'm still finishing up stuff, so I'll be launching the Kickstarter later towards the end of the year.
Yeah. So I mean, unless I have like a month or 2-month power outage, I pray not that 5 days. I'm not gonna. Yeah. So knock on everything around me. My hat. I'll start knocking on the water bottle and the comics. I don't even care. Like I don't need no more power outages. 5 days was way too long without power. Ladies and gentlemen, it really, really was, man. But let's dig into one other thing, man, before we really get to the end of this. This is what I want to know, Tom. You've had a chance to draw a lot as far as characters, right? I'm not going to go through the list because it's extensive. I don't have it in front of me, and I don't bloody well remember all of it. I know you've drawn a lot of things. Is there something like a character out there that you want to be able to put pen to paper to? For a comic book, obviously, not just, because there's a clear difference between just sketching it as opposed to actually drawing a story for the character. But in that regard, is there a character out there that you haven't had the chance to do that for? That you just look and you go, damn it, I wish someone would hire me for that?
Probably, it's like 2 that I grew up with. Either Ghost Rider or Wolverine, because those are characters that I read a lot of those books growing up, and so they're fun for me, and it would just be a little thrill for the 13-year-old me inside me to be like, oh yeah, I did that.
Fair enough, man. I totally get that.
One of those 2 books, because they're both fun to draw. They're both interesting. You can do a lot of stories with them. So you get a lot of fun takes and variations and stuff.
Yeah, that's very true of those two characters as far as just what they're capable of. I mean, from a level of violence to mysticism with either of them respectively. And yeah, so I can understand why those two would definitely be on the list. But like I said, for everyone out there, man, if Fist Foot Frankenstein, if that story tickles your brain, go tickle the link a little, right? Click on it and get to it, right? Because it's tickling my brain, Tom. I swear to God, I need people to go. Look, and,
Super fun action book, man. It's just killer.
Hey, look, and all I got to say is if you've enjoyed the show, do me a favor, go support the Patreon. You can see all these questionnaires that I get into, things that I get into, which in all honesty, Tom, I think based on the conversation we had, I've used this less than I typically do. My bad. Don't be mad at me for that,
Good.
right? But we're still going to use it a little bit, yeah, because, you know, I'm not going to make you fill out a fucking 50-page questionnaire and then just not reference anything. That would be rude as shit of me, right? So, I want to let you all out there know that if you're watching and you've enjoyed this interview with Tom Kelly, all right, what I want you to do, all right, I want you to send him a Cyclops, right? Like a nice Cyclops, one that's chill with a bunch of Shogun Warrior Godzilla toys, right? Right?
Oh yeah.
Just like a bunch of them. Yeah. And a couple pizzas, because why not? I make them Chicago style though, because I'm betting that's his preference. Right? Yeah, see, he didn't put that on there, but I figured as much. I've had some Chicago pizza. It's pretty fire. I ain't gonna lie. Now, if for some reason you're just like, fuck this guy, Tom. I don't like him. I don't know why you wouldn't, man. I don't know what's your problem. But that's your personal opinion. I want to let you know if you have not, you just send him a gelatinous cube, right? And you make sure that it smells of sauerkraut and is off-white. Not white, but off-white. I don't think Tom will enjoy that shit one bit, right? But besides that, like I said, click all the links in the description. Check out the Patreon. You'll be able to see more and more questionnaires. I'm finally actually getting them posted. By the time this gets up, you'll at least be able to see Fabian's back from the quests that we've done, and there's a lot of individuals there. I don't know when I'll have Tom's up. I'm trying to catch up. I almost actually have thumbnails for everybody on the quest over here. I'm pretty proud of myself for that, right? So do me a favor, right? Like I said, check out all the links. Everything Tom's working, man. He's got some awesome art. You can also check him out on a past PanCon, drawing a really, really dope Omega Red with a bit of a D&D twist, man. It was phenomenal to watch you draw. Tom, we're going to have to bring you back for a PanCon later. Might make you draw again. We might just be chatting some madness. I don't know.
That's all good.
Yeah.
All good.
Yeah, but besides that, look, like, subscribe, hit the notification or whatever bell you have to forever you're listening to this. We're available a lot of places. Always, always get your comic on and have a good night, y'all.
Super